This is the story of a child who transformed a family that transformed a generation, and how fame transformed Michael Jackson. This is the Thriller Effect.
They did not love Michael Jackson then. If they loved him, so how come it took him so long to make it?
At the Regal Theater, we beat the Jackson 5.
Those brothers know.
And we won that night.
I did not want to hear his group at all.
So I thank my father.
He just wanted to get out of Gary, Indiana, and move on to something different. I want to see all of his kids very successful in life.
By 1968, the Jackson 5 were still attempting to navigate the pop music bubble from way outside. It was an insane decade. If you listen to people who experienced the 60s, they'll tell you, for better or worse, everything changed. Every documentary, every film, every TV show based on this era stresses that the 60s began with the optimism of a daydream. They called JFK's White House Camelot, but the 60s don't look like a daydream, not from the outside looking in. If there ever was an age of innocence in America, it ended the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated. On the music side, the 60s ushered in an edgier blend of music. The crooners of the late 50s found fewer outlets for simple songs about teenage romance. Music had evolved. The icons driving this new aesthetic were the Beatles and Motown records. Two camps captured the attention of the world simultaneously, both creating key anthems at a critical moment. The Beatles fused pop music with elements of ska, folk, Indian, psychedelia, classical, and pioneers Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, and Elvis Presley. Brian Epstein presented these four boys from Liverpool as English mods, and the crowds loved it. Berry Gordy, founder of Motown Records, emerged with an inconceivable army of talent, and they all grew up within blocks of each other. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, the Supremes, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, the Temptations, both of these camps would define a generation. Motown and the Beatles typified the ethos of this ascendant culture. Master songwriting, major hit records. The ensuing financial windfall blew the music industry wide open. As youth culture became counterculture, business interests built a lucrative infrastructure around idealism.
And it was at this point that Lou Adler asked me to go to the Monterey Pop Festival.
The 1967 Monterey Pop Festival was a revelation for CBS record executive Clive Davis.
Dazzled by what I had seen at Monterey, and my life would be changed forever.
He saw a massive audience, standing room only. The potential for growth was limitless.
And when I started singing, I didn't think it was big business.
I felt grown up for all my life. I've been around grown people, since I was 5. I mean, on tour, backstage with all the musicians and the singers.
The CHITLIN circuit was a network of theaters where black artists performed for black audiences. A main feature of the circuit shows amateur nights. The GOATs of the 70s came out of these 60s contests. The competition was legendary.
We were like traveling in this van.
4 shows a night.
Nightclubs too.
My father was controlling all the activities of his little boys at that time.
Sometimes we'd do talent shows at schools. We were winning all of the talent shows.
That was a big thing in Chicago. We sang in Chicago before we had a record deal. People knew of the Hutchinson Sunbeams.
We all came up young teenagers, not in control of what we were doing. The stair steps also lead the way for every family group that came after us, including my brothers, the Jackson.
I mean, they were ready to ask and ready to learn.
They were friends of mine, all these great artists, because I was just a little kid looking up to these people.
The J5s, they looked up to us. They loved and respected us.
Oh, yeah, that was that rival. 5 Stair Steps was one of those groups that we used to look at and say, that's what we have to be like. We loved the way they dressed.
During the time, we wanted to sort of be like these people.
We were trying to get to that stage, and they had it already. And they were professionals. And they had a song out by the name of Ooh Child. Made a lot of noise.
We were known for our choreography. Boy, oh boy, did we burn up some stages. But trust and believe this, those brothers know. They know.
5 Stair Steps, they would come over to the Apollo Theater and just tear it up. The young ladies would scream and chase them off stage, and that's what we want.
Yeah, with dancing, it's always been a special part of us because we admire the groups that were doing choreography and we were coming up.
Father and their father, Joe Jackson, were friends. We were always like this, man.
We used to run into emotions. They used to travel. We would travel right behind them.
When you would rehearse, they would say, oh, you know these the Hutchinson Sunbeam. Oh, can they show us something? And you would do that. And they'd come up and you would actually help them.
Well, I wondered myself how Michael sang those songs with so much feeling, as if he had lived the part.
The Jackson 5 were competitive. Joe Jackson made sure of that. But before the Jackson 5 got to Motown, they had to learn how to win.
Now, I'll give you an example. And everybody claimed everybody loved Michael Jackson. They lied. If they loved him, so how come it took him so long to make it? They did not love Michael Jackson then.
And we used to do the Regal Theater in Chicago, Chicago's version of the Apollo.
Purvis Spann, who was one of the biggest disc jockeys in the city, used to have a talent show at the Regal Theater.
I started the Jackson 5. A guy by the name of Leo Blackburn brought him to the nightclub, on a nightclub called the Burning Spear. Michael and company, I listened to them and put them on the talent shows at the old Regal Theater.
There was in Chicago a Regal Theater. It was on 47th Street.
They were performing on the talent show that Wednesday night.
The talent on that Wednesday night was us,
the Hutchinson Sunbeams,
the 5'S Steps, and our guys from Gary. They would come there for the talent shows because there were no talent shows in Gary, Indiana.
And we have to play the same show.
Gladys Knight, they were on the bill.
I got a chance to meet the Jacksons at the Regal Theater in Chicago, and I heard them before I saw them, and I jumped up and I said, who is that?
And they were so impressed with what we were doing.
I ran to the banister to try to see who it was.
He was magnificent.
And we won that night. The prize that night was a contract with Stax.
In Chicago at the Regal Theater, we won the show and we beat the Jackson 5, who was on the show also. Oh, it wasn't even close.
Father kept us rehearsing because we worked very hard. We practiced 5 hours a day.
We were being forced to spend our weekends in Chicago and other places trying to win amateur shows.
Rehearsals because we want to be the best at what we do, and so put a lot of hard work into it.
Jermaine, Tito, and the rest of us were under tremendous pressure. I knew all the things my brothers and I had to do so well that I could have performed the routines in my sleep.
We were doing a show at the Regal Theater in Chicago.
They got to a point where every week at the Regal Theater, the Jackson 5 would win this contest.
We won that show at the Regal Theater for 3 straight weeks.
But no one else wanted to appear on the show because they figured, why appear? We're not going to win anyway.
We kept the Jackson 5 around Chicago a long time.
We were basically a local band that the pros used to come through Chicago, and we were the opening act.
Well, I had to buy them food every day to get to shows at the Regal Theater.
If you won 3 straight amateur nights, you were invited to do a paid show. The show we did was headlined by Gladys Knight and the Pips, who were breaking in. I heard it through the grapevine.
We played a concert in Gary, Indiana for our mayor, Richard Gordon Hatcher. He was campaigning at the time, so Gladys Knight was his guest there.
Joe Jackson and Catherine were struggling trying to get into the entertainment world.
Their father brought them up after their rehearsal.
I said, let me see what I can do. I called the company and I asked them if they could send a representative.
It was Gladys who discovered us first.
Gladys Knight, she was there with us from day one. We did a show in Chicago, and she liked us. She wanted Berry Gordy to see us.
Berry Gordy wasn't interested at first.
I did not want a kids group because I had Stevie Wonder and chaperone teachers. I did not want a kids group at all.
I was the manager in conjunction with the daddy, Joe Jackson. I took them to RCA Victor, a record company. They turned them down because their voices were too soft.
They had shot their music most of the majors of that day.
One day, not long after we'd been successful in the Chicago clubs, Dad brought home a tape of some songs. It was just one guy singing badly with some guitar chords. Dad told us that the man on the tape was a songwriter who owned a recording studio in Gary. His name was Mr. Keith.
Well, I first seen them on a billboard, so I was looking for a talented group that also had discipline. They performed for me, so I gave them an audition in their home. He had great voice control. He really sang like he was a full-grown man, and when he danced, I didn't think anybody could beat him.
Really, it was a little shocking to find a talented group that was disciplined, that had 3 who could sing well. Jackie, Jermaine, and the very dynamic Michael. We formed Steeltown Records with 4 other guys. I have the very first contract that they signed.
I signed a 6-month contract with Steeltown.
Well, Steeltown was just a local record company in Gary.
Gordon Keith produced the Jacksons' very first recordings before they double-crossed me and went to Motown.
We'll go to the Uptown in Philly and to the Apollo Theater here in New York.
There's the Regal, the Uptown, the Apollo. The talent that came out of those places is of mythical proportion.
The big dates for us opened up for Jackie Wilson.
I got to know these great artists. These were the best entertainers in the world. They were showstoppers, and I would have to go on stage sometime after them.
He was very good dancing and spinning and doing a split. And he must have been rehearsing a little bit off to the side when no one was looking.
James has known Michael since he's 5 years old. Michael used to come to his shows and sit in the wings and study him. He's like a stepson, like a godson.
After Chicago was the Apollo Theater. Dad knew there were more record people in New York. That's what a win at the Apollo meant to us.
At the Apollo Theater in New York.
You were there before you were brought? How did you get there?
Well, they heard that we were doing tours, the booking agency. Father got me with the booking agency, and they called us.
Chicago had sent a scouting report to booking agencies in New York. The Apollo entered us in the Superdog finals, even though we hadn't won the preliminary competitions.
My agent at that time was Universal Section. Dolores and Larry Miles called me and said, Joe, we got some boys. We want to put them on your show. And they said, Joe, you can manage them and you can put them on your record label. I said, I don't have time for kids, man, because I was trying to get my own career together.
Yeah, New York City, yes. I managed the Jackson 5. I was their attorney from about 67 to 70. I was working for the Musicians Union. I was a new lawyer. A gentleman, his name was Baby James, came into the union, knocked on my door. He said he had a group coming in. He wanted to be the manager of the Jackson 5. He wanted me to make sure that he had the papers ready the next day.
Okay, episode 2 is a wrap. We're trying to get episode 3 out quickly, and thanks for checking out the channel. Thanks for watching the episode, and drop a like if you're enjoying the series. The next episode is going to take us closer to the Motown signing. But who's this mystery character, Baby James, that just popped up? I'd never heard of him before preparing for this episode, and I'm guessing you hadn't either. So if you have any good guesses, I'd like to see what you guys have to say. So go ahead and tell me in the comments, who is Baby James? And what's his part in this story?